What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be jumping into a very specific deadlift variation that you can utilize if you have low back pain. For those who don't know, I am a McGill Method Certified Practitioner. What that means is that I studied under Dr. McGill, learned all of his methods when it comes to dealing with specifically lower back pain. There's not a ton of us in the United States, so low back pain and dealing with low back pain is one of my things that I really enjoy doing, and I help a lot of people do that. So today I wanted to incorporate some of that information into a deadlift variation that you can implement into your training if you're struggling with some sort of low back pain. Before we even start, I need to say, if you have low back pain, get checked out by a doctor, figure out your particular situation, and this is not for everybody. Everybody's low back pain is different and specific to them, and you need to make sure you go through a proper assessment to understand what causes your pain. Today, we're gonna be jumping into a deadlift variation that will help you if you have a flexion intolerance. When I say flexion intolerance, I mean it hurts when you bend forward at the waist or at that low back. So that's a very common style of low back pain that a lot of people attribute to tight hips, weak glutes, sitting all the time, a lot of environmental and overall lifestyle factors that can lead to that. So we're gonna be jumping into a variation today. So what I wanted to have with Alex to start, we're gonna kind of go over why utilizing a barbell deadlift when you have a flexion intolerance may not be a good idea for you. So let's jump over and check that out. When you're doing a regular barbell deadlift, what I'm gonna have you just check out here from the side, just get right at that bottom position, just about under the knee. So go up a little bit higher, a little bit higher, just above the knee. What you'll notice here is when the weight is out in front, and actually hinge a little bit more right there. When that weight is out in front and you're holding a barbell, it requires a ton of core stability because anything that's out in front of the body, you need to stabilize using the musculature of your core. If you are having low back pain, what you're gonna find is that this position is very difficult to get into, and you may not have the necessary prerequisite stability in your core to keep that position. It requires more stability internally than you may have with an injury like a low back injury. So relax. So what we will really wanna focus in on is a variation that you can do and you can implement along your recovery process that you can actually still hinge and still deadlift without really impacting or negatively impacting that low back pain. So we'll jump over there and check it out. All right, guys, so instead of utilizing a barbell deadlift that has that weight out in front, that again, may be a little bit too much if you're struggling with a low back injury or you're on your road to recovery, what we're gonna be utilizing here is a trap bar elevated deadlift. For those who don't know, a trap bar, you're standing in the middle of the weight. So now, instead of having your hands out in front of you, forcing you to have a lot more stability going front to back, we're gonna change the position of the weights, and now you're more neutral and you're able to control the weight much better. So, very simple setup. You can use any sort of elevating devices that you have. You can use blocks, you can use this out of the rack, whatever. But the idea is simple. We want to work on our core stability while we hinge, right? Most of the time, you'll see people that are hinging improperly, and they're getting a lot of that movement from their lower back, thus potentially exacerbating a lower back injury. So when you're just starting out with these, again, if your back pain is very excessive or you're at the early stages of recovery, I would not suggest this. I would suggest this later on after you've gained a little bit of that core stability and that functionality at your hips, whether it's mobility or stability. But the idea is this is not for when you just hurt yourself. You need to go through recovery and a rehab process. Just covering my ass here. So this particular setup, we have 3 of these blocks on either side. Alex is a little bit taller, so if his lower back was really hurting him, or was in a position where he couldn't reach down to the floor as far, we would increase this height. But for now, this is gonna be good. So when you're working on a trap bar deadlift, especially if you have a potential lower back injury or a lower back rehab, you need to make sure every rep is perfect. We need to make sure that our core is stable. We need to make sure our pelvis and our rib cage are stacked and that we are moving just from the hips. So I do not go for a ton of reps on these, and I reset in between every single rep. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have Alex demonstrate here. So whenever you're working with somebody with a lower back injury, you need to make sure everything is perfect. So we're gonna start with a good brace, pressurizing the abdomen, pushing out, stacking the rib cage on the pelvis, and now arms to the side, compacting those lats, everything strong and tight, and all the movement is gonna be from the hips. The hips go back to lower the hands to the bar. Good. Lock in, stand straight up. Perfect. And if you want to check this out from the side, I can kind of demo here. So do a couple reps here. What you're going to notice is that he is in a much more upright posture, and all the movement is coming from his hips, and he's keeping that lower back neutral. Yep, keep going. Perfect. Because when you're in this position, you want to try to, over the course of time, increase the depth at which you drop for your hips, right? Increase the level of hip and knee flexion, again, over the course of time. Give me one more rep. Perfect, and rest. One of the key factors here is the fact that he is able to still train. That's what we're trying to go for here. We're trying to do what we can with what that we have to work with, right? So if your lower back is hurting you and you are still trying to train, trying to do the things that you can, you need to start thinking outside the box. This particular exercise is fantastic for that, because what we're doing is we are really trying to focus on the skills that will help aid his recovery over time. We're working on that core stability. We're working on that brace. We're working on him stabilizing his lumbar spine that he may have been lazy with, or may have been the cause, lack of good technique on that hinge or on a deadlift that could have caused that injury in the first place. So in terms of progressing with this, we start by adding weight at a certain height, right? So we don't want to start dropping the bar to the floor too fast, because we need to work on your capacity to maintain a good position, maintain a proper hip hinge at this height, right? So for example, say we have Alex, he's been doing this for a few weeks. We loaded the bar up a little bit heavier every time. Now we're going to start by just simply rotating the handles on a trap bar. So I'll show you here. So pop out of there. So if you want to take a look at this, Jacob, if you're using a very traditional trap bar, you have two sets of handles, right? So you have the high handles that we were using, and a means of progressing this, if you have a particular lower back injury, and instead of dealing with the blocks, you can just rotate the handles. Very simple. Now he's pulling from a lower position that's going to challenge that range of motion even more without making it too excessive. So let's demonstrate here. Again, nothing's really changed, so start from the top. Again, hips hinge back, hinge back. You notice he's a little bit farther down than he was. So now that core needs to stabilize in greater degrees of hip and knee flexion. Good. Awesome. Give me one more. Tight. Perfect. Beautiful. So there you go. That's a really good variation for you to try on your road to recovery. Again, if you just hurt yourself, you need to give yourself time to heal. You need to give yourself time to rehab. You need to separate that rehab training and that performance training. But this is a fantastic variation for you to start to include as you get closer and closer to that performance style training or getting back onto the platform. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this low back sort of content, let us know down below. I have a ton of great useful low back information for you guys that you can implement into your training and that you can implement to stay healthy for longer. So there you have it. If you like the video, subscribe, link below, all the things, like, comment, do the things I'd like to tell you about, and I will see you in the next one.